Hey, we're here and we're back on the podcast with Mr. Anton Guinea from antonguinea.com.au, and he's the author of such books as Let's Talk About Safety, Upgrade Your Mindset, Uplift Your Teams, Upskill Your Leadership. And Anton is a leadership coach and a leadership trainer and a speaker, and he helps operations and safety managers create psychologically safe and high-performing teams without the fluff. So we'll talk about what that's all about, what we know, what we don't know, where we're missing the boat, what we should do. So, Mr. Anton, Mr. G, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Robert. How's life over there in the States, mate?
Life is wonderful. We had a couple of rainy days, but now the sun is shining. So after this, I'll be going for a nice walk and breath of fresh air and thinking about next steps and big ideas.
Nice. Good luck. Hope it goes well.
Me as well. And so, but like right here, we're in the present moment, right? And we're getting excited about this idea of leadership. And so, what are you all about? What gets you so excited to jump out of bed in the morning?
I get to work with amazing humans, really, most of the time, Robert. And, our work is training, speaking, and coaching work. So today I've got 6 one-on-ones. So today is very much a one-on-one day, 6 1.5 hour one-on-ones, which would probably be too much for most people, especially the introverts would be a bit confronted by sitting face to face. Oh, it would be exhausting for some. Though for me, to be able to sit with another human and really unpack what leadership means for them and really how we can help them go to the next level and help their teams feel psychologically safe. And what that means is safe to share, safe to contribute, safe to interact, safe to make a decision because they know they'll be supported by their leader. And I guess the more psychological safety you've got in your team, it's a great concept originally by Amy Edmondson around the 2000 era, where Amy talked about team members feeling safe to take interpersonal risk, Robert. And what that really sort of looks and feels like is an interpersonal risk is when you put yourself out there, and you say that I've got an opinion, I've got a view. And the fear is, or the unpsychologically safe workplaces have resentment, they have ridicule, they have rejection, and they have team members even. And it's not just leadership. So a lot of people think that psychological safety is really just a leadership thing, but it's also a team member thing. So team members play as big a part in psychological safety as leaders do. So the coaching work with leaders is really important. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. So does the 2-day training work that we do, or the speaking work. The training work is obviously group stuff. It's really group coaching more than training. And it's about getting people in a room and working through the elements of a lot of the work that we do, Robert, is leadership under pressure. So we work on leadership under pressure. There you go. There's the media wall. And that work is around, and how do we help leaders manage their emotional state and how do they regulate that emotional state basically and align, especially when the pressure's on. And the pressure in leadership comes from a whole range of areas. So it comes from above, it comes from below, it comes from all directions, and it comes from crisis events. Leaders deal with crises sometimes on a daily basis. And I think the quality of a person's leadership is determined by how well they can deal with those situations that impact their emotional state. In other words, puts pressure on them. So really challenges them to make decisions under fire, challenges them to stay calm and give direction, even when there is a lot of pressure or a lot at stake. And the leaders that can regulate their emotional state the best, obviously, stay cool, calm, and collected, and bring their teams on board, and they help their team stay calm. Not only that, they demonstrate to their team, they role model to their team, Robert, what sort of emotional regulation looks like. And for a team member to see a leader being able to stay calm under pressure is a big deal. And obviously the leader, is able to then lead by example. And we're a reflection of our leaders a lot of the time. And so, team members get to experience that, and leaders leave an impact on their teams, whether they like it or not. In our 2-day training, we say, who's your worst leader? And they'll say, oh, this leader did this or they did that. And I go, oh, right, cool. And I've gone away from asking that question, Robert, because people get so down and out about a poor leader that they might have had. And I'd say to them, what did that leader say to you? Oh, they said this or they said that. And I said, okay, cool. How long ago was that? 30 years. I go,
Yeah.
shit. You still remember it? Yeah, still remember it. And then, so now we ask, who's your best leader? Who's the person that's had the most impact in your life? Who's the person that's left you with this feeling of, I can accomplish something. You saw my potential. You gave me the opportunity. You elevated me further than I thought I could go. And, that's what strong leadership looks like. And people remember those strong leaders for all these good reasons. And so what I want leaders to do, Robert, is to be able to leave their teams with the right impact, with the right legacy, not one that, people are going to remember for 30 years as a negative impact. So, yeah, mate. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, all of those things.
Well, great. There's a lot to unpack there and a lot to think about, and I can tell that you're excited about this subject. And it's important for us to reprogram our minds, right? Because that caveman thinking is, well, if something bad happened to us, if there was danger, then I really need to lean into that. I need to remember that leader that was a jerk to me 30 years ago, because that's important information. But now that we're actually trying to get more important things done, we need to kind of consciously focus on the positive. And it seems like you and others that talk about leadership, they talk about this ripple effect, right? That it's people are counting on you, your children are counting on you, right? Your coworkers, for you to set a good example, because they'll learn from that and they'll pass on to others. So it's like all this ripple effect. Do you want to pass on the bad or onto the good? And so something that I'm impressed with you saying, like you sit down for these 6 one-on-one meetings, right? Because I find that when I was a kid and I still have this problem, like I find myself kind of like creating the stress or like using the urgency of a deadline to really like focus and motivate. And I know that's bad, right? I know that it's like kind of unhealthy to do that. And so do you see that happening when you say like, gotta get motivated, gotta be focused, gotta deal with stress? Do you see this problem of like using stress for productivity? Because I know that's bad.
Yeah, I think some people work better under with deadlines, Robert, and I think to me. So let me contextualize it in a sort of more of a global way. A lot of people talk about time management, and and when we get things done, and how we get things done, and how we prioritize, and I get all that. We sort of flip the switch on that a little bit and call it time ownership. And the way that you own your time, one of the ways that you own your time, is own your energy and know what your energy is and know what your circadian rhythm is. And, there's a great book written that's called Eat That Frog. And it's about doing the tough thing first. Just imagine, for the visual learners out there, for all your podcast listeners, for the visual learners, just imagine picking a frog up and eating it. And, that's the analogy. Excuse me. And that analogy is yuck. So there's some stuff that you need to do as a leader that's don't leave it until it's due. Don't put so much pressure on yourself so that you're doing it, say, at 5 p.m., like a robust conversation, for example, that you push it out, and all of a sudden you do it when you're not in the right energy, when you're not in the right mindset, when you don't have the ability to do it well, because your emotional state, there's our emotions wheel. So one of the things that we talk about a lot with people is, how are you feeling? How are you showing up today? And what I say to people is, do the things that you have to do, especially the ones that are tough, when you're at your highest energy. Now, that might be putting yourself under a bit of pressure at the deadline. If your energy's up, if your energy's high enough to do that, absolutely fill your boots. Most people aren't. So most people's circadian rhythm is early morning. If I ask, and I do this, I ask a lot of people, and I'd say 75% of people say they do their best work between, say, 9 and 12. And so if that's when you do your best work, lean into the things that take the most energy. And yes, some people say they work well with deadlines, and that might be right. I say why push it right to the limit when you can do it when you feel best? And that's about owning your time. A lot of people don't. I don't know too many leaders that I coach that have nailed time ownership. It would be one of the most continuous, common themes that I get. So, as part of coaching, it's what are your goals of this coaching? Time management. Anton, how do I manage my time? How do I prioritize? How do I use the time during the day? And so a lot of my work is in that space, working with leaders and coaching them on that. And a lot of them want to leave things. Oh, well, I work better under pressure. Okay, cool. Have you ever thought about working better when your energy's high? And so it's a different way to look at it. And I look, everyone's different. People think they know themselves. Until you really, I guess, do some work on your emotional state and your emotional regulation and use something like the Daniel Goleman model, which is emotional intelligence, and actually understand what your emotional state is and how to turn every emotional state into a positive. Because remember, anxiety and excitement are the same thing physically in your body. Anxiety, nerves, you talked about fight and flight in your amygdala. That there's the response of anxiety is the same, or fear is the same as excitement. It's just about how you frame it up in your mind. And so, until you do some of that work and really understand what your emotional state is, it really is difficult to lean into your energy and being in a positive emotional state. So I guess that's the long-winded way to answer it, to say, yeah, a lot of people think they do. I challenge people to say, well, have you thought of something different? Have you thought of an alternative view?
And that's why we need you to think differently, because we are probably trapped in our thinking. We're having the same thinking and the same actions and the same results. So we need to think about these new-ish ideas, right? This isn't it's not new, all this emotional intelligence, but it's last 10, 20 years. And when I know when I was a kid, I used to think that I was just like a brain in the driver's seat. But now that we are tapped into all this psychology, we know that we're so much more, right? We're the like mind and body, and we can think about our thinking. And so, like, what's the first step here? Like, I'm going to use that trick, by the way, like pivoting the camera. I feel like I'm in the room with you. But so you pivoted over to, but then I have to get resituated. But so you pivoted over to that wheel of the emotion. And so is that the first step? Like kind of knowing what we feel when we feel. Like, how do we start with this?
Mate, I'd love to. I do a lot of drawing. I'd love to get my Remarkable out and draw the model for you, which I won't do. But if you haven't got a Remarkable, get one. These are such a great tool. So let me for the visual learners draw a matrix, a 4-point matrix. Top left hand corner, emotional awareness. Bottom left hand corner, emotional regulation. So self-awareness, self-regulation. What that means is, how am I feeling in the moment? Put a name to your emotional state. A lot of people can't. There's this thing called alexithymia, Robert, which means that there's some people on the planet that actually, if I said to you how you're feeling and describe your emotional state, they couldn't do that. Seriously. That would be a foreign concept. So the first thing to be able to regulate your emotional state is to know what it is. And that's why we very specifically teach leaders the emotion wheel. And here's another thing about awareness and regulation down in those two left-hand quadrants, I guess, is that if you look at some research done by Lasada, it's called the Lasada line, there's a ratio. And this is life as well as relationships or even leadership. If you want to have a positive experience on the planet in general terms, the theory says that you want to have 3 positive emotions to 1 negative emotion. So that's a ratio. It's called the Lasada line, or it's called the positive emotional ratio. And so 3 positives to 1 negative in general, in your relationships, and I'm going to say in your leadership, in your life, means that you're going to have a pretty enjoyable time on the planet. So the research tells us. Now, here's my question. How do you know you're having 3 positive emotional states and 1 negative? unless you're measuring that occasionally. You don't know unless you've got some sort of, and you might only need to do this for a day, or you might only need to do it for an hour or a week, but spend some time, as I have, understanding, are you more green, or are you more orange, or are you more red? Understand that, so that you can be aware of what your experience is in general terms. No one does that work, and it's the most important thing that we can do sometimes. we're just a big bag of skin carrying emotions around, Robert. Seriously, like, the quality of our life is determined by the quality of our emotional state. Ask people that are suffering through horrible, challenging, debilitating, anxiety or depression, and it's hard for people that struggle with that, because they don't have a great day-to-day experience on planet Earth. And so if we can, be aware and then regulate our own emotional state, guess what? The other two quadrant are social awareness and social regulation. Thank you to Daniel Goleman. Credit to Daniel Goleman. And actually credit to Mayer and Salovey, who were the two researchers that put this research out there in about 1998. Daniel Goleman picked it up, wrote the book on emotional intelligence. But this social awareness, can you read social cues? Can you look at another human, and can you say to yourself, while you're talking to that human, what experience does that human have when they're with me? What are they going through at the moment? And the thing about it is that when we're talking to someone else, or when we're having a conversation, might even be with a group of people, we might get triggered by something they say, which impacts our emotional state. So we need to regulate that, because nothing good happens when you've got a heightened emotional state. When I say heightened, I mean heightened negatively. When you're pissed off, angry, frustrated, whatever the negative emotional state is, never do good work when you're in a negative. There's really very few occasions where people, when you have an amygdala hijack, which means that fight or flight response, when you're heightened negatively, you don't do good work. But at the same time, in this social side, where we're socially aware of how other people are experiencing us, we might trigger other people too, Robert, which is a bit of a mindset shift for people. What? I trigger other people? Maybe you do. As a leader, you might trigger someone in your team, and so you've got to be aware enough of what their response is to you, so that you can help influence, maybe not regulate, influence their emotional state. And the skill there in 2025, and the word of probably the 2020s, is empathy in leadership. Are you aware enough of another person's emotional state so that you can influence that and help them maybe have a better experience when they're with you, and not trigger them, and know what it is you've just said, or know what it is you've just done, from whether it's a facial expression, or it's a body language, or it's to get them to, or to impact another person in a way that might change their emotional state, because our behavior has an impact on others. Let's be frank. And it's this multi-skilling of think fast, talk slow. Think fast, talk slow. And that's multitasking. A lot of people say, I can multitask. Oh, okay, cool. Good luck, because it's actually not multitasking, it's task switching, which is okay. But I think really true multitasking, is thinking at the same time you're speaking, and being able to look at another human and understand what they're experiencing when they're with you. So that, to me, is, and this is just leadership sort of 101, really. And they're concepts that strong leaders understand intrinsically. 10% of people are born with leadership skills, or I say emotional intelligence skills. Some people don't have to learn this. Some people just I did 6 coaching sessions yesterday, and I was coaching a client, and this person said, and it was a she, so I'll say she said that she can't understand why it comes so naturally to her to read another human, and to understand what other humans are going through, and to sense, and to feel, and to experience with others. She says others just don't have that ability. And she said she finds it nearly weird that not everyone can do it, because this person's such a natural at reading others and being such a great communicator and knowing her own emotional state and talking in emotions. This is how I'm feeling, and this is what I'm experiencing now, and that's that self-awareness piece. And so yeah, is this a new age concept? Potentially 20 years. Like I say, Marin Salovey, some research, Daniel Goleman. If leaders can lean into understanding their emotional state, I can tell you. And just ask Brene Brown. Brene Brown wrote the book on it, The Atlas of the Heart, naming every emotional state. And it's just such a great book for leaders to read and understand.
So there's so much to think about, and I love the science here, and I love just what you've learned and what you've passed on to others. And there's a lot to think about here, right? Just this idea that for the rest of us 90%, then we need to learn some of these skills. And I imagine even if someone in the 10%, maybe they're inconsistent, or they can further develop what they're doing. And I just this kind of aha about how the amygdala takes over. Like if you have these heightened bad emotions, like you can't think. You need to get yourself back to that state. You need to regulate. You need to identify the emotions, do your breathing. I think that's huge. And also, what I find a powerful motivator, Anton, is helping others, because sometimes we can discount ourselves, right? We can say, well, why do I need to take care of my emotions? Who cares about me? And you're saying, well, because it affects others, and then people will see your example and they'll pass that along. They'll pass that back to you. And that's a place that we don't want to be. But a place that we do want to be is talking about you and getting people thinking and getting people excited about these next steps with you and your books and your coaching. So in these last couple of minutes of our conversation here, I want to make sure there's room for like one last little exciting concept to talk about. So what do you think people need to know more about in all of this leadership, emotional intelligence soup? What am I not asking that I should be asking you? I just don't know to ask you.
Let's switch from emotions to thinking, because I love what you said before, Robert. And I'm just going to bring you back into the room. There's the bookshelf. There's the 3 books. I'm running low on the 3 books. They're the ones that, and a massive shout out to Robert Plank today, team. If you are on Audible, you will hear some amazing vocal tones from Robert Plank, as Robert audio's my book for me. So thank you, mate. There's a massive shout out, and thank you for doing that for me. I think one of the ones, so from the upgrade book, there's a 5-stage process, and you mentioned, and I love it, and you might have got it from here. Think about your thoughts. Think about your thoughts. That's step 3 in upgrading your mindset. And the technical term for that is metacognition. Excuse me. So it's 5:30 in the morning, mate, so I'm still trying to get my voice right for the day. I hope it does come good for the day.
Maybe it's because you ate the frog. Trying to get the frog out.
Good analogy. Good analogy. I haven't had a coffee yet. I think that's half my problem. I got to get coffee happening. So the one concept that I would love to share with leaders out there, and thank you for the opportunity today to do that too, is think about your thoughts. What meta is the thing of the thing. So a meta study is a study of all of the studies. Metacognition is the cognition of the cognition. In other words, what am I thinking about? Why am I thinking about that? And how do I think about that? In other words, challenge your mindset. Why do I respond like I do? Why do I have this belief system? Because our beliefs drive our behaviors. What are my values? How do my values shape my behavior? Why is it that I do have that value? Do I need to change a belief system? The only thing that we are truly in control of, Robert, on this planet, there's only one thing that we're in total control of, is what we think. It's the only thing on the planet that we have total and utter control of. A lot of people have the same thoughts day in, day out. Why don't we change that up a little bit occasionally and know what we're thinking drives our behavior? How we behave drives the consequences we get. So if we want different consequences, it starts with different behavior. It starts with different thought processes. So think about your thoughts would be the concept that I would love to share with leaders. Why do you do what you do? And this is a Simon Sinek question, actually. Simon Sinek says, why do you get up in the morning, which you asked me, and then Simon Sinek puts a comment on that and says, and why should anyone care? What I say is, why are you doing leadership, and why have you never thought about that question before? Because people come to leadership because the boss was away or because it was more money, instead of because I actually want to change a life. I want to impact another human. I want to leave that ripple. I love that ripple effect. I love that. I talked to someone today who goes home and talks to their sibling, who takes that to work the next day, who shares with their kids, who takes it to school. There's this massive impact of leadership. And that all starts with a leader thinking differently and developing I think the reason that these 5 are in this first book: start with a future focus, develop a positive perspective. Positivity is so important. Emotional contagion. Think about your thoughts, lead under pressure, and know your leadership style. I think out of those 5, if you had asked me to pick one, I'd say think about your thoughts.
And we need to be thinking about our thoughts, and just the way that you set some of this up, it reminds me of, like, say you're going to school, right? And you take this class and that class, and you look at what you've done, and you're like, hey, I'm like 80% to getting a degree. If I just like do a couple other things, that I'll really have accomplished something here. So if there's a leader where they fell into some kind of role and you're like, why did you do this? And they said, oh, more money, bosses. Well, you're like, hey, you're on a path and you almost have something here, as long as you can harness it a little bit.
Absolutely. Beautifully put. Even if you end up in a leadership role, let's say I won't say wrong, for other reasons other than, to give, to serve, to empower, to see potential. If you end up in leadership roles for those reasons, it doesn't mean they need to remain your reasons. Beautiful. You can change the rationale for you. You can change the driver, you can change the force, you can change the energy behind that too. You know what? I'm going to lean into humaning. I'm going to lean into seeing potential in others. I'm going to lean into this development piece. I'm going to lean into, and look, it's a 1978 word. It's still relevant, transformational leadership. Some people say it's overdone. McGregor Burns, 1978, wrote the book. Transformational leadership still a thing, because it is simply a leader's job, Robert, and I'll probably leave you with this as a mic drop moment. A leader's job is to create more leaders.
Very nice. Well, we need your help to do that. We need your training and your guidance. That keyword humany, I have a friend, Stephen Howard. It's like harmony plus human. So I think you're onto something there. It exists, and it's like one of those really good ideas about how we need to be like examining these beliefs, right? Because it's so easy to get fixated on certain like keywords, sentences, stories, and when they say things like 90% of our thoughts are just on repeat, it seems it's a little bleak, depressing, but it's like, well, I guess that can serve us because it keeps us going in a certain direction. But if it's a direction we don't want to be, maybe it's time to re-examine that and get a better life, better workplace, better socializing with our cohorts. And so how do we tap into some of these amazing ideas? You have your company, your training, your books. What are some next steps here?
AntonGuinea.com.au is the place to go. And reach out there, go to our shop on there, and so you can purchase some of our books or our products. I would love to talk to any of your listeners. Please reach out. If you go to antonguinea.com.au, you'll find your way to the TGG website, the Guinea Group, which is obviously our business. And there's a 15-minute review and refocus link there to jump into my calendar. That's the best place to go. So not a lot of time in my calendar, but you'll find 15 minutes in there at some place to come and have a quick chat, and we can jump on a chat, and I'd love to serve. So in 15 minutes we can unpack a whole lot of stuff, and then you can decide whether a coaching program or a training program or something like that is right for you and your team and your business. So we'd love to work with leaders who want to develop psychologically safe and high performing teams, because that's our sweet spot. And how do they do that? By learning to lead under pressure and deal with the stress and the pressure that comes with leadership. Because if you can deal with that, you can get the leadership experience that is just so fulfilling, that is really in that human aspect, that humaning. So, and humaning creates harmonizing. So, yeah, antonguinea.com.au and reach out. And I'd love to hear from you. Or Anton at theguineagroup.com.au or Anton at antonguinea.com.au. Anton at antonguinea.com.au is probably the easiest one to remember.
All right. Anton at antonguinea.com.au. This is inspiring, especially when you're saying like this and this unlocks that, and you can finally get a few of these things unblocked and not be so stressed out, not stress out others. So as we're headed to antonguinea.com.au, it's time for the scary part of the show, Mr. Anton. It's where I try to put you on the spot, try to stump you a little bit, and I ask for a fun or interesting quote or lesson that has served you that you can pass on to us to cap out the show. So what comes to mind as far as a fun or interesting quote or lesson?
I'm going to show you what I've got on my phone. My favorite quote is,
if it is to be, it is up to me.
Absolutely.
Very good.
And for leaders, I think that's the message. I think if it is to be leader, it's up to you. Go and make it happen. Go and lean into the important elements of leadership. It's up to you as a leader to make a difference, and you have the ability in leadership. Leadership is the second most important job on planet Earth after parenting, Robert Plank. So when leaders take their work that seriously and they know the impact that they have, they will know that if it is to be, if strong leadership is to be, it is up to them.
And they're not even mutually exclusive, right? Parenting, you should be a good leader and show your kid how to change the world. And since you're sharing phones, here's my little guy. And I'm thinking
nice.
every day of like, how do I, like, what are those bad examples that I don't want to pass on in 30 years? I don't want to have bad thoughts about me, but I do want to say, hey, well, how can I stay calm under pressure, do the right thing, be a good example? That way he will do that as well. antonguinea.com.au. Many amazing ideas and thoughts. And let's make sure to go to that website and click over to the Guinea Group and schedule that 15-minute phone call to take those next steps, to take this seriously, to change our beliefs and habits and actions and do something better. Our team is counting on us. Let's get it done. antonguinea.com.au. Mr. Anton, lovely speaking with you today.
Robert, you're a champion. Thanks for having me.